So welcome everyone. So happy to be learning together again with everyone at this class of Drisha. Today's class is the continuation of our session on Vayikra, a guide on relationship with Miss Rachael Gelfman Schultz. And with that, I'll turn this to you, Rachael.
Thanks, Evie. Okay, so today our topic is going to be the Yoledet, the woman who has just given birth. It is, and the sacrifices, she, as we'll see, she becomes tameh, however you want to define that, and she, in order to come back into the temple, she brings sacrifices. We're going to look at that passage. It is a challenging passage, and I definitely cannot claim that I have all the answers. But the reason I wanted to look at it, besides the fun of the challenge, is that it really touches on some very important themes in Vayikra as well as in life. But in terms of the themes in Vayikra, it touches on what exactly is Tuma and Tara, what is, for lack of a better translation, purity and impurity, but I don't really like that translation. We'll talk about that. And sort of sacrifices as a whole, and particularly the Korban Chatat, which is translated, again, for lack of a better translation, is translated as the sin offering, but we will go more deep into that and what it actually may be, what that could mean, and what maybe is a better translation. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so would someone like to read it for us? Anyone? Maureen, thank you. Go for it.
Always glad to read. God spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. When a woman at childbirth bears a male, she shall be impure 7 days. She shall be impure as at the time of her condition of menstrual separation. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. She shall remain in a state of blood purification for 33 days. She shall not touch any consecrated thing, nor enter the sanctuary until her period of purification is completed. If she bears a female, she shall be tameh 2 weeks as during her menstruation, and she shall remain in a state of blood purification for 66 days. On the completion of her period of purification for either son or daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. He shall offer it before God and make expiation on her behalf. She shall then be pure, she shall then be tahor, from her flow of blood. Such are the rituals concerning her who bears a child, male or female. If, however, her means do not suffice for a sheep, she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. The priest shall make expiation on her behalf, and she shall be tahor.
So make expiation. Make expiation is kapara. That's another important theme that this passage, kapara is in Yom Kippur, the same word. So that's another important theme that I forgot to mention that comes up in this passage. Okay, so like in previous times, I'm just going to ask you to throw out all your questions. And I, of course, have a certain direction that I'm going in, but there are many questions here that we're not going to get to answer all of them, but let's just start by asking all the questions that you have. I mean, there are a lot of challenging things in this passage.
Well, I'm already unmuted, so
so you can start.
So I'll start. So the thing that always troubles me about this is why does she have to? Why does it take longer for a female if she has a female than if she has a male? That's the thing that to me is the most troubling about this.
Yes, that's a very good question, which we're not going to answer. I've heard several answers, and I'm not, like you, not particularly satisfied with any of them, but we will touch on one of the answers. But I don't have a good answer for that, and we're not. That's not the direction we're going to go in. But that's a very important question, which I also struggle with. Okay. What other questions do people have?
Why does she have to make expiation? What sin has she committed by having whatever sex kid she ends up having?
Right. Well, for everyone, doesn't matter, right? For both boys or girls, she has to make expiation, right? Which is again, that word kapara, right? Atonement, right? Is the way we like the Day of Atonement, right? That's the way we normally translate it. And right, and we see she brings a sin offering, right?
Also,
Right, so just, which is very strange. I mean, she seems to, I mean, it's a big one, you know, in Judaism very much celebrates giving birth. Like, why would she have to bring a sin offering? What's going on here? Why does she have to make expiation? Why does she need atonement for bringing us, you know, for doing what the Judaism thinks is probably the most, or at least one of the most, you know, important things human beings can do.
Also-
yeah,
also, I was
Dan?
going to say, why, if one measure, the length of time for purification is different, yet the other measure, the kapara, is the same in both cases.
Are you saying, why is there a different time period that she's impure, but
Right.
the same process to become pure? Is that what you're asking?
Right. The same
Yeah.
process at the end.
Right. Okay. Yeah, good question. Also, I mean, it goes along with the question of Maureen, which we're not going to really get to, but it's also an important question. Yeah. What else? Anything else people see here?
Well, I have two different standards if you're poor or if you're rich.
Right. I mean, I think they're trying to make it easier for her, right? If she's poor, if she can't afford a sheep, in other words, she can bring the turtle doves and the pigeons are cheaper. So in other words, they're making her, not that they're lowering, I mean, you could look at it as they're lowering her standards, or you could look at it as, you know, they're giving her what she can pay for. Like that's what she, you know, that's what she can afford.
I have some question here.
Yeah, kind of.
Normally they are equating the dam leida to the dam ragil, you know, the regular flow.
Right.
Now, the regular flow, you said the tahara. So in one case, the flow is the tuhar by her going into the mikvah
Right.
after the period. And here she has to actually go to the Kohen
Mm-hmm.
and give a sacrifice.
Right.
And the Kohen is the one that metaher, that does the tahara, and not the mikvah. So
Right.
there is a very big difference between the she cannot do it on her own, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
In
Right.
one case, it's up to her
Yeah.
to be metuheret. Okay.
Right.
So she
Right.
can go herself to the mikvah. She is the one that is in charge of counting. She is in
Interesting.
charge of actually deciding when she is going to the mikvah. And she is the one that is actually getting out of the mikvah, and she is then pure. Okay,
Right.
pure for what? Pure for having relations with her husband. Okay, now
Right.
here, it's somebody else, it's the Kohen that has to actually decide.
Well, he doesn't decide, but he needs, right, she needs, right.
She needs to bring a korban.
Right.
She
Exactly.
needs to, her, first of all, it's not up to her to decide how many days, okay? It's already designated. Okay, now what happens if her flow is longer? What
Right.
happens then? Is she still
Yeah.
in flow?
Mhm.
She can bring korban when she's still in flow. I mean, they're assuming that everything's okay, and perhaps the
Right.
flow in males is shorter than the flow in females, and whatever. But
Yeah,
the whole
exactly.
thing is not on her. It's all muhtav. It's all kind of put on. She has to accept something else. You know, she's not her own person anymore.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a very interesting question. Right. And so in other words, she still needs to go to the mikveh, right? If
Yeah,
she,
well,
after
it
giving
doesn't
birth,
say.
but even though you're right, it doesn't say that explicitly. That's what we know from halacha,
Well,
but right,
there
but
it
she
doesn't
needs this
say.
process. Right. Right. And she needs this process of the sacrifices, which require going to the temple and require the Kohen and yeah, right, requires some power outside of her. Right. She, like you're saying, she loses some of her autonomy in the sense that she needs the Kohen to make
Well,
to
not
do her
only that,
kapara,
not
to
only
do her
that,
kapara.
not only that, why, what if she lives in the Galilee and the Beit HaMikdash is in Jerusalem? You know, how can she do that?
That is a good question. I never thought about that. Practical of that, right? She has to go all the way to Jerusalem. Maybe she does for having a kid. I mean, there's something in that. But yeah, that's an interesting question also. So we're going to see that there are a few. So like you said, a woman in her normal period does not have to do this, right? But there are a few other categories, which we're going to see later, that similarly, you know, bodily emissions that have the same thing that they have to go and bring the korban to bring the sacrifice and then also require the priest. So we're going to talk about what is going on here that both need a sacrifice and then of course by definition and needs a priest. In other words, that she needs someone else to do it for her. Maureen, did you have a question also? Another question? Yeah.
Yeah, I had another thing that she has to bring two sacrifices. One is an olah and
Yes.
one is a chatat. And
Right.
so that also raises a question for me, like why does she have to bring
Why
two different kinds? And so what is the olah? You know, we asked what is her sin that she has to bring a sin offering, but what is she bringing the other? I guess it's a hodah, right? An olah is
Maybe,
usually,
but there's another korban that we normally bring for a todah, so it is puzzling. In other words, it's not the normal, you know, the shlemi, it's not the normal todah korban. So
okay.
it's also
So
a good. What is this olah exactly? So. Well, I wasn't sure if we were going to get to this source, but because you asked the question, we'll try to get to that source also about the olah. We're mainly going to go. Did anyone have any other questions before we move on that they wanted to add? Or good. So the main question that I want to focus on, but I think in focusing on that, we're going to touch on many of the other issues, but not the question of the boy versus girl so much. Maybe a very small little bit, which is an excellent question, as I said. But the main question that I want to focus on is this question of why does she bring a sin offering, which I think will touch on a lot of the questions, including the, you know, sin. Why is she, like Hannah's question, why does she need to bring korbanot at all in order to become tahor? Why can't she, you know, why can't she just go to the mikveh like you do after a period? And why does it have to require a priest? And also connected to Maureen's question as well, what is the olah doing? Why does she have to bring two sacrifices? What's going on here? So the rabbis, of course, discuss this question, why does she need to bring a sin offering? And there's a very famous explanation. I don't know if has anyone heard any explanations of why she needs to bring a sin offering, the yoledet, the woman after childbirth? All right. Well, we'll read it here. You can see that. What?
She swears off having children, or
yeah, exactly.
There's all
She's
kinds
like
of
so
nasty things about
upset.
having
Yes,
children.
exactly. This is the classic explanation, which most people bring, which many of the commentaries in the Gemara and many commentators bring it as well, that quoted that she, in her like pain of childbirth, you know, she's having contractions, whatever, and she's so upset. She says she's so upset that she like swears off ever having any children again. And of course and it's a swear that, you know, it's an oath that she doesn't honor, like, because once she gets through it, she's like, okay, I'll have children. Susan, you want to read that Gemara? Here, the students of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai.
Yeah, the students are.
Sorry, hold on. Right, I just got it. Okay, go ahead.
Wait, there. Students of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai question asked him, for what reason does the Torah say that a woman after childbirth brings an offering? He said to them, at the time that a woman crouches to give birth, her pain is so great that she impulsively takes an oath that she will not engage in intercourse with her husband ever again, so that she will never again experience this pain. Therefore, the Torah says that she must bring an offering for violating her oath and continue to engage in intercourse with her husband.
Okay, so before we get to Rav Yosef, what I didn't know until recently is that actually this is not the only opinion given in Gemara. There's actually meaning there's an objection even in the Gemara. But before we get to Rav Yosef's objection, what do people think of this answer? What is your Chana?
It's an absolutely silly answer because she's not swearing. She is just calling out from her pain. Okay, she's not making an actual oath. Because to make
you're saying you don't think it should even legally count as an oath, whatever she says out of the pain of child.
It should not be counted as an oath, because for an oath there is a certain way of doing an oath, and that's not the way to do an oath. That's one thing. The number two thing is that she is. It says that she is violating the oath. Well, by the time she brings the offering, she has not gone back to her husband yet. So why should she bring the Korban?
Right.
If she has not, first of all, there is no oath. But if they can't count it as an oath, she hasn't violated the oath because she has not gone back to her husband.
That's actually a very good point that I somehow never thought about before. But that's a very important point, right? She brings the offering before she has sex with her husband. So what's going on, right? It's yes, very strange. Any other comments on Rav Shimon Bar Yochai's? Another thing I would add is like, okay, there might be some women who do this, but because some women do it, like everybody should have to bring this sacrifice. It seems strange. Meaning, it certainly could happen. It's not impossible, but
I would say, Rachel, that probably Shimon ben Yochai's wife did that, and maybe he should think about that. Give some thought to that.
That's an interesting point. We see. So we're going to come back to the question of who said this, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because he's an interesting character himself, and we do see later on that he also has. I mean, in another story with him, that he has an interesting relationship with his wife. But so yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that was his personal experience. Okay, so let's see. What does Rav Yosef? He has a different objection. Susan, you want to continue?
Sure. Rav Yosef objects to this answer. It's really confusing. Isn't the woman an intentional violator of her oath? I don't understand what she means. What does that mean?
Okay, keep going and I'll explain. Just finish
and her oath be dissolved so that she may engage in intercourse with her husband. The matter depends on her regret of the oath. One is obligated to bring an offering for violating an oath of an utterance only if his transgression is unwitting.
Okay, so I'll just, in order to explain, and then we'll get to the second thing that Rav Yosef said. The definition of a sin offering, a korban chatat, is what we see in Leviticus in Vayikra Daled Bet, Leviticus 4:2. Speak to the Israelite people thus: when a person unwittingly incurs guilt in regard to any of God's commandments about things not being done and does one of them. So in other words, a sin offering is brought for what they call shogeg, an accidental, mistaken, when he does the sin unintentionally. So if she has intercourse with her husband, she's not doing it. I mean, she's doing it intentionally. She's not doing it by mistake. So it's like, what is it? Why should she be under the category of korban chatat, of a sin offering, when her sin is intentional? That's what he's asking. Okay, and keep going. What's the second answer? Second objection.
Furthermore, if the purpose of the offering that a woman brings after childbirth is to atone for violating an oath, then she should be required to bring a female lamb or a goat as an offering, which is the
Keep going.
requirement of one who violated an oath. rather than the bird offering brought by a woman after childbirth.
So not only this, but there's actually a special offering that one brings for violating an oath. So it doesn't make any sense that she would bring a korban chatat for this reason. So this is an interesting conversation. And it is also interesting that the person who said this opinion is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. What do we know about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai? What's the most famous story that people know about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai?
He's been away from his wife for such a long time.
Right.
He
spends
hasn't
12
been-
years. Yeah.
12 years.
He spends 12 years in a cave learning Torah. And the whole time he's in this cave learning Torah, he and his son, right? He's running away from the Romans after saying bad things about them and getting sentenced to death. And he spends 12 years with his son in this cave, just learning Torah and getting food miraculously, and not even wearing any clothes except for when they daven, they're like buried in sand. So it's like the most unphysical existence, the most purely spiritual, unphysical experience, that one could have. So why does it make sense that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai might be saying this opinion?
Because he has no experience with this has nothing to do with his life. He doesn't really have the experience.
You're saying he's like divorced, whatever, but for lack
Yes,
of a better word.
He's divorced from life.
Right, from like physical life, right? And he also doesn't seem to possibly, I think his personality seems to be one that doesn't have very much tolerance for physicality, for the weaknesses of the flesh. He just lives in this like pure abstract world. And then he comes out of the cave. Yeah.
What was the thing when he came out of the cave and then God punished him or sent him back in? What was this? I forgot what the story was.
They saw people, he and his son saw people just doing normal things, plowing, like doing normal things that you have to do in the world in order to get food. They were farming, plowing and sowing, and wherever they looked, they burnt people up. And God says, why did you come out? In order to destroy my world. And he sends them back in for a year. And then they do learn a lesson at the end of the story, and they see that, sometimes people do use the physical also in order to do mitzvot, and they do learn a lesson at the end and they're allowed to come out. But yes, that stage is also very important. They look at people doing normal things. Yeah.
He was a black and white kind of guy.
Well,
Somewhat
not
extreme
only
kind
that,
of guy in some ways.
Not only that, we don't hear anything that he had another child after that.
Interesting point. Right. Not surprising. Also, at the beginning of that story, he at first is relying on his wife to like bring them food, and then he says, "Oh no, women aren't very reliable, so I'm going to go into the cave because I'm afraid she's going to like turn us over to the Romans, meaning that they'll like torture her and she'll give away our secrets and she'll turn us over to the Romans." So he also doesn't seem to have too trusting a relationship with his wife to begin with. Okay, so that's the Gemara. So it's an interesting debate. So Rav Yosef seems to be objecting to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai on, saying that this isn't really a sin that would be cause her to bring a sin offering, right? It doesn't make any sense. But there's actually another direction that I want to look at also, which we see in other Gemaras, which is that maybe chatat, what we call a sin offering, does not necessarily indicate a sin at all. In other words, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai assumes that there's a sin for which she is bringing this offering. That's why she brings a sin offering. That's why she needs the kapara, the atonement from the priest, but we'll see. We're going to look now at some other sources that actually say, no, maybe despite the name, and we'll see what the name comes from, this, a sin offering does not always indicate a sin. So the very first one, I'll just read this quickly. Wherever a sin offering is brought for a sin, the sin offering is mentioned before the burnt offering, the olah. This also touches a little bit on Maureen's question. Here, since it is not brought for a sin, the burnt offering is mentioned before the sin offering. Okay, so that's interesting, but puzzling. Like we still don't know what's going on here. So one way to sort of understand this, like what could this mean that a sin offering is not actually brought for a sin, is to look at what are the other cases of people who bring sin offerings. And especially the other cases that are mentioned in this same Parsha of Tazria and Mitzorah, right? In the same passage in Vayikra. So what I want to do is to look at the Mishnah in Kritut, and this also touches on Hannah's question of like, why does she need the Kohen? Why can't she just go to the mikveh? And we see that she's not the only one. So maybe that will help us answer the question of like, what is going on here? Okay, so someone want to read the source 5, Mishnah Kritut? Anyone?
I'll read it.
Okay, go ahead.
These are the 4 individuals who lack atonement. The man who experiences a gonorrhea-like discharge, the Zav, a woman who experiences a discharge of uterine blood after her menstrual period, Zavak, the woman after childbirth, and the leper. In all 4 of these cases, in all 4 of these cases, although the individual has completed all the other steps of purification process, the process is not complete until the atonement offering has been brought.
Right. So in other words, exactly what Hannah pointed out. Even after they do the, whatever the preparations for the mikveh and go to the mikveh, they also need this offering, the sin offering or atonement offering. And the word, right, mechusarei kippurim, they lack atonement. They need a sacrifice in order to become pure. So, and Rashi even takes this a little bit further. For individuals who lack atonement, they bring a sin offering not because of a sin, but in order to eat sacrificial meat. In other words, the sin offering is not because they did a sin, but because they were tameh, right? They had to. But what does it mean to be tameh? Like, what is the definition of tameh? Meaning not what is the translation, which is often translated as impure, but like what is the actual practical significance of being tameh? Like why does it matter? What does it mean?
So it means that you're not fit for ritual purposes, like you can't enter the temple if you're tameh.
Right. I mean that's really the basic thing.
Kohen remain tahor.
Exactly. So in other words, so Rashi is saying that they're bringing this chatat not because they're a sin, but because they were tameh, which meant really tameh, like that's all it means. In other words, it's not really even a significant category in this day and age without a Beit HaMikdash, right? They couldn't enter in that time of Vayikra, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and later the temple. And they couldn't eat the sacrificial meat, as it says here. That's what it meant to be tameh. So all these people were tameh, and they needed to bring this offering in order to become pure, and in order to re-enter the temple or the Mishkan or the tabernacle. So what do all these categories, by the way, have in common? These 4: the Zav, the Zavad, the Mitzorah, and the woman after childbirth.
Bodily fluids.
Exactly. So all of these things that they call are like tuma'ah that comes from inside the person, that comes from things that comes in, that comes out, but whatever, like that come, and none of them, at least, I mean, it's a question about the leper, but none of them have any obvious sins. It's not someone's fault that they have this irregular discharge. Yeah.
But there is a question here. In any irregular discharge, like Zava, I understand it to be menstruation.
No. Zava is like bleeding not at the time of her period.
Oh,
It's like
I see.
unhealthy.
Really
Yeah.
not in the time. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's either like if it goes on too long or if it's like in the middle of the month she bleeds. That's what zava is. Later, like the two categories get conflated and like later, much later in rabbinic. But in the Bible, that's what it means. And so too with the man, the zav, he's having like also like an irregular discharge. And the mitzvah is like, the rabbis do try to find, there's a question about the mitzvah, is that because he sins, but the basic, if you just look at it in the, in this parsha, it's just like, it's a skin disease, or it's also like Hannah said, it's bodily emissions. Okay. So I wanted to look, so continuing on this track, we have here also, so in another Gemara in Shavuot, the rabbis also question Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's assumption that the sin offering is because of a sin. And this passage here is actually talking about the goat offering on Yom Kippur, which says explicitly that it's l'chol chatotam, that it's for all of our sins. And they're asking, what sins exactly is this goat offering coming to atone for? Okay, so does someone else want to read this next Gemara in Shavuot? The Gemara asks. Someone else?
Yeah, I can read.
Okay, go ahead.
The Gemara asks, why not say instead the goat offering atones for a woman after childbirth, as the Torah differentiates her from other people who must bring a sin offering following a period of impurity, in that she brings a sliding scale offering, whereas others bring a fixed sin offering.
Okay, we're not going to go into all the details here. So, but basically about the sliding scale versus the fixed sin offering, but the point is that they're asking here why maybe this goat offering that's atoning for sins on Yom Kippur is atoning for a woman after childbirth. Okay.
Rav Hoshaya said, the verse states for all their sins and not for all their impurities. Accordingly, since the offering brought by a woman after childbirth is not to atone for sin, but due to the fact that she went through a period of ritual impurity, the goat offering will not atone for her.
Right. So in other words, the fact that the Torah uses this language, the chol chatotam, for all their sins, means it couldn't be talking about her because she doesn't sin. She's just impure for all their impurities, right? She's lo ulechol tumotam, for all their impurities. Okay. And then what does the Gemara ask?
But if so, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who says a woman after childbirth brings an offering because she's also a sinner, what is there to say?
Okay, so and then the Gemara tries to answer. In other words, but for Shimon Bar Yochai, he does think she's a sinner, right? So then this answer of Hoshea is not a good answer. So what does he say? And then the Gemara goes on to discuss. But we see from here also that the rabbis question this, that it's debate among the rabbis. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that a chatat has to come for a sin, and the other rabbis, the sages, the chachamim, say that no, the sin offering comes for something else. Okay, so if that's the case, then why does she bring a korban chatat of the sin offering? What's translated as the sin offering, if it's not, sorry, I see my internet connection is unstable, but hopefully it'll be okay. Does anyone have any ideas why, if she is not bringing the korban chatat for some sin that she did, then what could it possibly be? Any ideas? I mean, I think here it gives a little clue also to one direction. The Gemara and the Mishnah that we read. I mean, what is the purpose? What is the function of the sin offering? Or what does it say here? It says for all their sins and not for all their impurities. So what's going on, right? And also in according to Rashi, right? It said, not because of the sin, but in order to eat sacrificial meat, right? All these 4 individuals. So what's the function of the sin offering in that case?
To make her able to function, to be part of the functioning of the Beit HaMikdash, to be able to eat in Tahara,
Right,
to be able
exactly.
to maybe even thank Hashem for giving her a living child,
Yeah, for sure. Right,
so that
right,
the child is alive and she's gone through it well and she's alive.
right, right. We'll see that also later. Yes, exactly. So in other words, she's like re-entering the ritual space because she was excluded from the ritual space for a period of time, depending on whether it was a boy or a girl. And she's re-entering the ritual space with whether the tabernacle or the temple, and she can now bring sacrifices and she can eat the sacrificial meat. So in that case, what's the atonement for? What's the kapara for? Right. I mean, remember also that, yeah.
For being forbidden from that, from the kahal, really. Before.
Exactly.
And
right.
for being able to re-enter the kehillah, right, the whole thing. And perhaps that's why there is a period, a real long time period, so that she can go from far away into Beit HaMikdash.
Oh, that's an interesting question, right? Good point. Getting back to your question, what happens if she lives in the Galil or far away? Right.
Or saying that's the minimum time, and she doesn't have to be.
Maybe she could go later. She could go
later. Maybe that's the minimum time because, that's a minimum time possible to arrive. But and maybe that's also the difference between boy and girl.
Oh, how so? Okay, interesting.
Because in a girl, perhaps she needs to be present with the girl, with feeding the girl herself. Whereas with boys, it was a tradition to give them to a meineket, to somebody else
really?
would.
I never knew that was a boy-girl.
You can see that from Moshe, that they brought him a meineket.
Interesting. I never knew that was a gender.
So that's kind of an understanding. Perhaps that's what it comes from, that she is not free to go actually and leave the baby.
Right.
And maybe they have not really had a possibility to take the babies with them or whatever. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, listen, when we think about well, first of all, just to summarize, right? So we're saying that the sin offering is atoning for the time that she's away from the temple, and that might not be her fault at all, like we see in the classic definition of the sin offering. Also, it's an unintentional sin, right? It's not something that she meant to, that the person meant to do wrong. But there was this like distance from the temple, and as Chana I think is starting to get to, it's also it also makes sense practically, right? If you like think about it from a practical perspective, that a new mother is not going to be wanting to like go trek to the temple and prepare a sacrifice and like all that. Like she's busy, she's other stuff she's doing, she's taking care of a newborn baby. Meaning in that sense, like if you look at it as not as like tameh is a bad thing, but as tameh is like a practical thing, that she has this time that she doesn't have to go to the temple, and that she shouldn't go to the temple because she should be doing other things. In other words, she's taking care of a newborn baby. She probably doesn't want to leave the house too much. She's all, she's busy, and busy doing something she should be doing also. Okay. so in that case, though, this language is troubling. Like, why? I mean, chatat means sin. Like, what's going on here? You know, if this is true, that chatat is like more just after the person has been distanced because of tuma, and now they bring the korban chatat in order to re-enter the ritual space, then why is it called a korban chatat? It seems like strange name. Maybe should we call it the korban of purification, like hitarut, like a korban of purification. Why chatat? Like, what is this language going? What is this language? Anyone, before we get to it and see, does anyone know of any other, like that shoresh chet tet aleph? What else it can? What other ways it can be used besides a sin? Anyone happen to know before we see?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was that speaking? Ziva?
Right. Well, I
Hi,
know
Ziva.
that verb meaning when you miss the mark.
Exactly. Yes. Right. And what? So what do you think that would?
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
finding it hard to apply, but also
Yeah.
it seems like that is what's involved in some way.
Exactly. Hechti is so okay. Yes, that is a good direction. We'll talk about how to apply it. But if you see, do you want to read for us, Siva? So that's exactly what Tosfot says, what you're saying, missing the mark. So this is Tosfot later on that same page of Gemara. Basically, that page of Gemara brings up a lot of different cases and asking about why, why would they bring a korban chatat? And one of the cases is a Nazir, a Nazirite, who brings a korban chatat when he accident. So part of the oath of the Nazirite is he says that I'm not going to have contact with any dead bodies. And so what happens if he unintentionally has a contact with dead body? Then he has to bring a korban chatat. Okay. So the Tosfot says on this. Do you want to read it, Siva? Are you comfortable reading? Yeah.
Incurred through the corpse. That's
right. So that's the verse about the Nazarite.
Yeah, number 6:1. According to the sages, this is a language of lacking, I see, or missing out, as in Kings 1, verse 21.
Son
Solomon and I will be regarded as chataim, and like in Judges 20:16, every one of them could sling a stone at a hair and not miss.
Yeah, exactly, which is exactly what you said, Ziva, right? Missing, right? There it's like literally missing a mark. The other example he gives from Kings 1, from Melachim Aleph, is Bathsheba is talking to King David, and she says, if Adoniah becomes king, my son Solomon and I will be regarded as chata'im. Now, if he becomes king, they're not sinners. It's not their fault. He's the one who became king, but they are in some way, they're missing an opportunity, right? Like Shlomo was supposed to become king, and if Adoniah becomes king instead, then they're missing out. The Hebrew here, for those who the Hebrew is helpful, is lashon chisaron. Like it's something lacking. It's something that, meaning the example from Judges like really says it quite clearly.
Another word question. Doesn't that
Mhm.
root sometimes mean sterilizing, making something?
Also,
Yeah.
exactly. So in a shir that I heard from the rabbi of our yeshuv, Rabbi Altshuler, he actually translated it that way. Chitui means like to disinfect, to clean. So that also makes sense. In other words, when he gave a shir on the same topic, that's a conclusion that he came to, that which makes a lot of sense in this context, right? That it's cleansing her from her period of tumah, as they do for the zav or the zava or the mitzorah. But what would it mean here? So that I think also definitely works. What Ziva? Sorry.
No, I just want to say another thing about it. So I think that sometimes these terms, which are sort of taken to mean a moral judgment really aren't. There's kind of a technical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
yeah, an
absolutely
interesting
technical.
point, good point. Right. Okay. Yeah, technical though, I want to say a little more also. It's definitely
Well,
a
I
technical.
mean, it's purification. You're talking about purification, and that's exactly what you're doing in the chate, in
Right, l'chateh,
purifying.
exactly.
You know?
Right. Yeah, definitely, for sure. But I also want to take it a step further. So here, so if we were to go into this, so I think for sure it works that it could be chitui, like to cleanse. But this I also found an interesting direction, the idea that it's missing out. Like in this case, how would you, if that's the meaning of chatat, then how would it apply to the woman in childbirth?
Well, because she needs to be purified from her, from the whole process of birth giving. The whole process of birth giving involves blood, involves yes, a new child born, but it also involves a placenta having to be getting out and actually destroyed.
Okay.
And
what else? What is she
herself
missing
being
out on? Yeah, Ita,
Can you
sorry,
hear
did
me?
you want to say something else?
Okay.
Yeah.
There's
Welcome, Ita. Good
also-
to see you.
I know, I'm sorry, I came halfway through the.
Yeah, what did you want to add?
There's an idea, and I don't know where it's from.
Yeah.
The idea that comes to mind is that I don't know where the source is, but there's an inyan that women through the experience of birth and the experience of a challenging birth and the pain of birth are very removed from feeling close to Hashem, and they remove from like a place of service. You know, there's a inyan of even like blaming Hashem for the pain, which is supposed to be the chet of Chava, and
Yes,
and
that's another direction.
feeling really being in that space is not that it's a sin, but it's a place where you're not you don't have a kavanah of doing Hashem's holy service because it's so challenging in that moment.
Yeah.
So maybe the chet is about if there's any like challenge of Hashem and Hashem's way in the world.
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely a direction that some of the rabbis go in. Number one, like just the chat, like the danger and the and the pain and like all that, of the physical experience of giving birth maybe could take someone away from being in a place that they feel that they can serve God. And also there are rabbis, I mean, I didn't bring these sources, but there are rabbis who connected to the original sin of Chava, which I think you also touched on. Do you want to read the Sforno? A little bit goes in that direction. You want to read the Sforno? Shall make expiation, shall make kaper aleha. Ita?
Can you hear me? Very?
Yeah.
Shall make expiation on her behalf. So during all the days that she had been excreting blood, his thoughts have been preoccupied with the phenomenon of semen and the actions, and she has therefore not been in a fit state of mind to enter the precincts of the temple and utter sacred matters.
Yeah. So, okay. I mean, it's very hard to translate this kli hazero pulatam, which here is translated as a phenomenon of semen in their actions. But I would say that a little bit is similar to what Ita's saying, that like she's so in all these like bodily challenges, right? That she is not, meaning all these difficult bodily stuff, right? That's the result of giving birth. And the process of giving birth, right? That she's like not in a space, she's not in a fit state of mind to enter the temple. So Rav Moshe Lichtenstein, in a shir that I listened to, who's Rav Aaron Lichtenstein's son, takes this Sforno and the Tosfot and goes in even in another direction, but based on the Sforno. So he says the Sforno, right, is talking about her sort of being preoccupied with her own body, with the own all the, difficult stuff that happens when you give birth and right after, right? And she's very preoccupied with that. And Rav Moshe says, it's not only that, but she's also very preoccupied with her baby, right? In other words, she's both gone through this very difficult physical experience and is still going through it, of course, in the weeks following childbirth. But she's also very, in the best possible way, very preoccupied with her baby. And that's the way God made mothers to be, that they're obsessed in some way with their baby, right? And because of that also, they're not in the proper state of mind to go into the temple. So in other words, so Moshe Lichtenstein looks at this Tosfot about missing out, and he says, everybody, when they make a choice, and even if you make a choice to do a good thing, you're also missing out on something else. In other words, she's doing the best possible thing she could be doing in having a baby, but she's still missing out on going to the temple. In other words, he brings an analogy from his world of like a soldier who goes to the army and they see that, that his world, that's like a big mitzvah, but they are missing out on learning. They have to leave the yeshiva and they go to the army. But in our case, right, the woman who gives birth is doing the best possible thing, and she in a holy thing, right, of taking care of her baby. But as a result, she is missing out on something else, which is that she can't go to the temple, which is true in our day too, in other ways, right? Like a woman who is, after childbirth, may not go to synagogue, may not participate in any number of communal rituals in the weeks and months following birth, because she has another thing to do. She's taking care of this baby, or a man also these days, but that's another question. So I liked how Rav Moshe Lichtenstein connected this idea of missing out, right, or missing the mark, right? It's not missing the mark, but missing an opportunity, right? She is where she should be and doing what she should be, but she's also missing another opportunity at the same time. And she brings the Korban Chatat to sort of celebrate that now she can also go back into that way of relating to God through ritual and through community. So all that is nice and good, and but I want to take it one step further in the last 4 minutes that we have, which is to acknowledge that giving birth is a very physical and challenging and difficult experience, and it's also a time when the mother is naturally obsessed with her baby and taking care of the baby. But it also can be a spiritual experience. Maybe she's not going to the temple, or in these days, I don't know, going to shul or wherever. But she can be having another, but she can be having another form of spiritual experience. In other words, she might be distanced from God in the sense that she's can't go to the temple and can't bring sacrifices. But I was uncomfortable with the idea that as a result, she's distance from God, period. I mean, that can happen, obviously, also in giving birth, but giving birth can also be a spiritually connecting, uplifting.
I want to say something. During all this time of I'm saying impurity in quotation marks, because it's not really tum'ah, the woman can and should and does pray, right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So
her private prayer,
in fact,
right?
in fact, she is connected to God because she is actually doing her prayers.
Yeah.
Exactly. And also the same way in times of your regular period. You're not exempt from praying. You're not exempt from connecting with Hashem as a private person, as a one-on-one. Okay?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's not a matter of connection to Hashem, and it's not a matter of really, you know, doing something to atone for not connecting to Hashem. I think they were wrong with that, because it's really a matter of connecting back to a community.
Yes, I would agree. Yes, exactly. There are a lot of different ways to connect spiritually, right? There are connecting with a community and through a community also. I mean, you can reach a certain kind of spiritual height by connecting with the community, right? Not only to connect with
And
community,
today,
there are certain rituals also. I'm just going to hold off for a sec because I want to finish up because our time is almost done, and then we can afterwards, I'll stay on and we can continue discussing. But I just wanted to read what Rabbi Sachs said, because what I really, Rabbi, the Alava Shalom, who recently passed away, the Chief Rabbi of England, former Chief Rabbi of England, because I think that he touched on this point of like what the spiritual experience that she is experiencing. Yes, it's not through the community and it's not through ritual, but she is experiencing a spiritual experience. So he says, at another level, they surely suggest something more profound. There's a halachic principle, they being the laws surrounding the mother after childbirth. There's a halachic principle, one who is engaged in a mitzvah is exempt from other mitzvot. It is as if God were saying to the mother, for 40 days in the case of a boy, and doubly so in the case of a girl, the mother-daughter bond is ontologically stronger than that between mother and son. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what he means by that, but we'll leave that aside from now. I exempt you from coming before me in the place of holiness because you are fully engaged in one of the holiest acts of all, nurturing and caring for your child. Unlike others, you do not need to visit the temple to be attached to life in all its sacred splendor. You're experiencing it yourself directly and with every fiber of your being. Days, weeks from now, you will come and give thanks before me, together with offerings for having come through a moment of danger. But for now, look upon your child with wonder, for you have given a glimpse of the great secret, otherwise known only to God. Childbirth exempts the new mother from attendance at the temple because her bedside replicates the experience of the temple. She now knows what it is for love to beget life, and in the midst of mortality to be touched by an intimation of immortality. In other words, she's experiencing something which in some ways is even a higher spiritual experience, but in different ways than what she would get if she was in the Mikdash. And what I'd just like to wrap all this up, like what I like to see, and then I'll open it up for questions if anybody wants to stay on, but what I like to see is when she's bringing this Korban Chatat, she's reconnecting to God, but also maybe even from a higher spirit, like from a deeper place than before. In other words, she's coming back into the community and coming back into this ritual space with this very strong, meaningful, spiritual experience that she brings with her. So maybe the Korban Chatat is even actually like getting to a deeper place in her spiritual experience and her connection to God. So thank you all. I'm gonna, for anyone, it's already 10:02, so 10:02 or 3:02 for you, those in America or Canada. So whoever has to go, go. And if anyone wants to stay on and has further questions, comments, we could stay on for a few more minutes. But thanks to everybody for your, for all of your contributions. Yeah, Chana, you had a further comment?
Yeah, I had a further comment because I think that it's my thinking of it is the opposite of yours.
Okay, I'm
I
interested
think
to hear.
that she had a much higher experience. She had much
That's what I
higher
agree with you.
experience than anybody else that is having this high experience by going to the temple. And
Right.
that's what she's atoning for. For
But why is
being
she atoning for it?
for being higher and in a different kind of connection and not being part of the community. And she's going
Interesting.
back into the community to be the same as them.
Interesting. So you're agreeing with me that she had this high spiritual experience,
Yes,
but disagreeing
yes,
about the purpose of the atonement.
that's right.
Thank you so much, everyone.
All right. Thanks,
Okay,
everyone. Take
להתראות.
care. See you next
Bye-bye.
week.
Oh.
Bye.